we are going to learn about authentication and JSON Web Tokens and so on and so forth. If you remember from our previous class, we have created a cluster in MongoDB, and we are going to create a collection in that where we will store anybody who is registering with our system. So this is typical flow where you first time log in into any website, you create your username and password, and then it allows you to in future logins allows you to use same username and password to get your details back. It is important when we store the password of our users, the users that are getting registered, to not store it as plain text. What do I mean by plain text? If you look at the database, here the email which we are using as username as well for a login is plain text. You are able to make up what this means. It's a test at example.com. But if, and also the name of the user, test user, you are able to understand because it's in plain English language. However, if you look at the password, it's some scrambled uh, list of words. How this scrambling happens? Well, this is something called hashing, where you take the plain text that was entered by user and encrypt it using a hash, and then store it in a database. So if even if so, for example, I am a database engineer, even if I had access to this database that you see on my screen, I wouldn't be able to make up what is the password for the test at example.com user. So I cannot understand the test user's password. That's why I cannot hack into his account. Even though I am a hacker and I gained access to the database. Uh, Now, does that make sense? What is hashing and why we need it? If it doesn't stop me, because uh, as I told, this is very critical and going to be asked in interviews for sure. In some or the other form, authentication does come up in interviews. So let's look at what first be in the code. So we have in our routes, there is a route created. So this is the same Node.js Express project, similar, not the same, but the similar project, a new project, and I will provide the code of it after the class. This is the similar project that we have built in the past, where we create routes and two routes, login and register. Now, for the simplicity purposes, I am not using controllers here, but in real applications like the architecture we saw last classes, you should use controller. But here we are extracting the email, password, and username from the request that is done from, in our case, Postman. And if we are checking, let's ignore this part. We are checking if the user is already there. If not, we are hashing our password. So the password field uh, is hashed using a framework or a library called bcrypt, which uses bcrypt hashing. And I encourage you guys to read into it more in depth. But what essentially it does is it takes this password and converts it into a hash using a random string and an algorithm. So two things are used, a random string and an algorithm, which we call salt. And this hash password gets stored here with the algorithm and the salt. Does this make sense? So when somebody registers, we take the details, explaining it again, we take the details, we just hash the password using bcrypt library, and bcrypt library converts the plain English password to a hash password that looks like this using a hashing function and something called salt, something called hashing algorithm, and random string. This random string plus hashing function is called salt, and that gets stored with our scrambled password. So remember, the salt gets stored with our scrambled password, and we get a string from a string something like this. So here is my register API where I'm saying my name is test user. I'm trying to register this user. My email is test@example.com and secure password 123. So let's create a new user. So node user and node. And the password is, let's say, I love node 123. So here I'm providing the password, which is I love 123, but let's see what happens. So we are registering a new user, and let's now refresh our cluster. I forgot where to refresh this, but should be there. So if you see the new user that got created, the password doesn't look anything like I love node 123. It is something scrambled words, um, and and I cannot make up what the scrambled word means unless I am the actual user. So this is the magic of storing the passwords encrypted while creating a user. Now what happens? Let's take this. I'm trying to log in into my website, and I provide email and password. I provide. So let's enter the correct username and password. I provide the same username and password, and we get a message login successful. But let's try to change this. So let's say by mistake we added an extra character here. Invalid credentials. So how does my system know that this password is incorrect, even though uh, the stored password doesn't look like anything of this nature? So this is where the magic of bcrypt plays in again, where when we log in, the system or the library, bcrypt library takes the same password that was the password that was entered, and it extracts the salt, just the salt part, and then uh, converts this to another scrambled string like this. So using the same salt and algorithm, when you convert it uh, using the bcrypt.compare the saved password with the database password, the user password, the user's password will again get converted to this if they entered the same password. So and then if they match, then we say login is successful. Otherwise, if they don't match, we say invalid credentials. Um, am I clear here? How did this decryption of the passwords happen here? Or how did we compare the passwords? Any questions in how did we store the password scrambled, and how did we compare the password scrambled, and why we should not be storing the passwords in plain text? Stop me if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to explain this again, because if you don't understand this part, the next important topic will become even more complicated. I'll give you guys 5 seconds to think for any questions you might have. Okay. So moving on. So now this is simple login and login app register. But what if my system had other APIs like profile, dashboard, etc., right? So for my system to be securely allowing users, only valid users to access profile and dashboards and other routes, we need them to enter username and password every time they're trying to access our API. Now, trying to access the API every time by entering username and password every time is not ideal. For example, you go to Amazon.com, you just enter your password one time, and then you're constantly accessing Amazon.com. You are not re-authenticating or providing your credentials over and over for each new thing that you load on the page. Well, to enable this, there are several technologies, JSON Web Tokens, OAuth, and so on and so forth. But in our case, we will learn today something called JSON Web Tokens or JWT. So before we jump into the code, let's look at what the JWT looks like. Is this image clear? Somebody uh, uh, give me thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this image clear? Then I can proceed to uh, explaining. Is anybody having issues seeing the image? You looking good? Uh, Very quiet class today. Uh, but I'm assuming you guys are able to see the image. So let's understand what JSON Web Token is and how it works. So when user first time comes into our system or our website or our mobile app, they enter their username and password and hit this API, the login API with their credentials. When they hit the credentials, uh, instead of sending a login successful message, we will generate something called JSON Web Token, a specialized token that will be valid for some amount of time that we will specify. In our case, 1 hour, along with the uh, successful response. And then subsequently, the users can use the same token that was received in the login request for all other accesses to our backend. So how does that work? So is this clear? This image is clear, and hopefully, if you guys stop me, I'll explain this again. Let me recap quickly. User enters the username and password. They get authenticated successfully. In the response, we send the users a specialized token, which is nothing but a string back. And subsequently, whenever user is accessing our backend, they are including that string for each and every API request. And this string will be valid for X amount of time. In our case, 1 hour. Some websites said it is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour. So doing that, let's move on to how that gets implemented. Let me rename this and this. Dot code. So first, for that, we will use a middleware, and this middleware's job is to authenticate the user. So what it does is it extracts the token or the JSON web token that user will send in each request after login and check if the token is accurate. Verify token is a method again that comes from the JWT and our implementation, which is, I will come to that file soon. So we are verifying the token. And then if the user is okay, we are passing the control to the next method to handle the route. It's very easy to lose me here. So stop me if you guys are confused. We get a request from a user. So the file that we are seeing is uh, number 6. We get a request from user and send user is sending the JSON web token in that request. We take the token and verify if it's a correct token or a random garbage thing. So how does the token get generated in the first place? So for that, we call something, we use another node module, something called JSON web tokens. And JSON web token needs a secret, which is nothing but a secret that you would create, just like a username for username password kind of a secret. But this secret is for your entire Node.js backend, not just the login. And then we tell the system that this token expires in 1 hour or whatever we specify in our environment variable. And then we use the generate token method, which internally uses JSON web token, the library sign method, to create a new token. So let's see how this works, right? So this is my login. Let's do the login again. So in my login, I get a special message now. This is a token that got generated by the method on the 8 and 9, on line 8 and 9, when I hit my auth route. So when I'm using my login route, I'm doing all the same steps, comparing passwords and everything that we saw previously. And if everything is nice and good, we are generating a new token that we saw here, a token here on the line 3, using the method that we specified earlier. So here, line 8 to 9. This is the method that generates the token and sends the token back in the response. So in the subsequent API calls, let's say I'm using a protected route, which is profile. I need to add a header. Let's not add a header, but we'll come to it. I try to access this without passing the token. It is telling me that authentication is required. And we are getting a status unauthorized. So user is trying to now access our backend, and we don't know if they're a real user or not. But if somebody is a real user, they would take this token that they got from the login response and pass it as a header and append it with a keyword. This is a standard where you pass the same token that you got from the previous login step and append it with the word bearer space and then token. And now we are able to access our route again. So real quick, without providing the token, system will complain that you need a token, and with the token, we are able to access the system. Now, how does this work in our system, right? So we have in our index.js uh, protected routes, the new routes, and protected routes uses the middleware authenticate user that we were seeing previously. So what does this middleware do is takes this token that we see here, bearer, authorization to header, request.headers.authorization. So this is the authorization header from the request and takes the bearer part of it and then splits the token in two parts, bearer and this other string, and verifies the other string using the verify method that we saw here previously, where it internally uses JWT verify. Does that make sense? This is a little complicated if you have never seen this before, so I'm happy to explain this again. Uh, but this is what's happening. Let me go back to our image. User is sending this request. We verify the token that was sent on the step 7 to see if it's the right token or not. So let's say if I try to misplay with my token, let's say I added some extra words, it will still reject it. And if you tried this token after an hour, it will still reject it. So this is in nutshell how you create uh, authentication by allowing user to register, and also how do you use JSON Web Token to authenticate the users for any other API request that they make after they have successfully logged in. It's a complex topic, and I feel like we are going too fast on it. So if you don't get it, please ask me to explain, and I will explain again. But these are the core concepts we want to cover today, where we have how do we store the passwords, encrypted or hashed, and how do we use those usernames and passwords to authenticate the subsequent API requests. I'll stop sharing and allow you guys.